Hey, how you doing this morning? So excited to be here with you today, and it is an exciting day. I had a great drive up. Only had a few snafus. I forgot my handheld computer and had to run home and turn around and go back and get it, and then busted it up here. So hey, I made it, no problem. But anyway, glad to be here this morning. Picking up where we left off last night, we're answering this question. Why is it essential, or why is it important, or why study the Bible? Well, there's some essential things that we get out of studying the Bible. And as we saw last night, we study what we get is growth, and it's essential for growth. And there's bad growth and there's good growth. But how do you have the right type of growth? Well, the bad growth is where you don't do anything and you just kind of blah, blah. The other type of growth is where we are having the right attitude, like a baby going after the milk, and B, appetite, craving it, desiring it, longing for it, pursuing it, going after it, and then with the right aim, and having that right aim is to grow spiritually. And then we're looking at the second one this morning. Why is it, and why study the Bible? Well, it's essential for spiritual maturity. And as we've been talking about this, I mean, we're looking at some basic things. We're going back to the basics. We're recovering the basics like we would at the beginning of any season. I wanted to get some clarity in regards to something that Vince Lombardi said, and this is about getting back to basics. Let me read it to you. It was the summer of 1961, and Vince Lombardi started the football camp holding something that needed no explanation and said, "Gentlemen, this is a football." In 5 words, he communicated his point. If you want to be successful, we're going to remember the basics and make sure we're executing the fundamentals. So, in regards to the why study the Bible, well, it is fundamental to spiritual growth, and it is essential for spiritual growth. Hebrews chapter 5, verses 11 through 14 says this, "About this we have much to say, and it is hard to explain since you have become dull of hearing. For though by this time you ought to be teachers, you need someone to teach you again the basic principles of the oracles of God. You need milk, not solid food. For everyone who lives on milk is unskilled in the word of righteousness, since he is a child. But solid food is for the mature, for those who have their powers of discernment trained by constant practice to distinguish good from evil." So there was a problem that is addressed in verse 11, and it is simply this: is that the information wasn't difficult to understand. The problem wasn't the information; it was the hearers. The hearers had developed a learning disability. They had developed. They weren't born with it. They developed it. And so we consider that, in other words, they didn't want to grow. They didn't want to move forward spiritually. They were content where they were. They didn't want to grow up. And as a result, they lacked spiritual maturity. They were like Peter Pan and his lost boys, who didn't want to grow up. They ran off, or they flew off to Neverland. Like those boys, these hearers wanted to do what they wanted to do when they wanted to do it, without any thought of God or any thought of what He had for them, or whether this was good or bad, right or wrong. They just wanted to do what they wanted to do. They wanted to live in a fantasy world of their own, where they made up the rules as they went and were holding to or obeying no one. Do you see that when we consider that, and we consider where they're at, there's a key word in verse 12 that says this: time. That's the word, time. He says, for though by this time, they should have been spiritually mature enough to teach others, but they weren't. And this is important to underscore. it underscores the importance of getting back to the basics, reteaching the fundamentals of the faith. That is something needed today. It's needed for us to go back and review those fundamentals, to go back to the basics, to go back to those fundamentals, and rewarding for us sometimes to move forward, because sometimes we get stuck and we just need to go back to move forward. And so that takes one word. One word. There's one word that is key to this fundamental of growth spiritually, to have that spiritual growth as a result of Bible study. And that word is obedience. It is obedience. When someone is spiritually mature according to this passage, what does that mean? What does it mean to be spiritually mature according to this passage? Well, is it when you have accumulated so much biblical facts and knowledge that you can bury anybody in Trivial Pursuit? No, that's not it. Is it when you reach a certain age? No, that's not it. Is it when you graduate from seminary? No, that's not it. So according to this passage, what is it? What is it? What does it say? What does it say according to this passage? Well, the passage says this. He says, but solid food is for the mature, for those who have their powers of discernment trained by constant practice to distinguish from good and evil. So this passage says that you are mature if you've trained yourself through constant use of the scriptures to distinguish good from evil. In other words, they were obeying the Word of God. They were obeying the Word of God. I like what Howard Hendricks has to say here. The mark of spiritual maturity is not how much you understand, but how much you use. In the spiritual realms, the opposite of ignorance is not knowledge, but obedience. So I ask, why study the Bible? Well, it is the divine means of developing spiritual maturity. And how does that happen? By obedience. Hey, that's it for this morning. Last night I asked the question, got milk? This morning I'm going to ask you another question. Got obedience? Have a good one.